All right, and so that's your reminder that if you do not wish at any time to be on screen, you can go ahead and take yourself off camera. However, we do spotlight our speaker, Dr. Farney, and myself at times, Liz at times. So you should not appear, but if you want that backstop there, you've got it. And we just also ask that you take a moment to make sure that you're muted so we don't get any feedback. And without too much further ado, Dr. Farney, I want to welcome you and say thank you for giving us your time this afternoon in Massachusetts and still morning there in Tennessee. We're grateful to you, and certainly you've got a captive audience today talking about immune health at this particularly sensitive time, you know, in our personal histories. So thank you, and why don't I turn it over to you?
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I really look forward to this opportunity to share with people about the immune system and also getting feedback and answering questions that people might have. Just want to make sure you guys can see my screen. You can see that good?
We can see, yep.
All right, well, we'll get started here and then we'll have enough time for questions. As we talked about, I'm going to be addressing the immune system and really bringing balance to the immune system. Specifically, helping with the idea of Th2 dominance. We'll be touching on a little bit more of that. So I want to talk to you about the different components of the immune system, how each of them play roles in the immune system in protecting ourselves, how we get out of balance. Also want to talk about an idea called Th2 excess or dominance that causes us to have a lot of issues, and then some strategies for bringing us back into balance. Before I get too much further, though, I do want to preface this that this is still considered to be a theory, this idea of being in Th1 or Th2 dominance. A lot of research has been done and more needs to be done in order for them to be more confirmative on this idea. But in my opinion, there is quite a bit of reason for us to understand why people are suffering from these chronic illnesses. And I want to present an idea of how we can help people that are stuck in this state to resolve some of these problems. So we find ourselves in this pickle that we're in, where we have lots of people that are stuck with chronic infections. We have bugs or infections that don't want to go away. And we have people that are having these unrelenting symptoms, ongoing chronic fatigue, headaches, brain fog, a host of other symptoms that are bothering people that they've tried one supplement after another, one medication after another, and they've not been able to find any relief. We also find ourselves loaded down with stressors, whether they be physical stressors from traumas, whether they be mental, emotional stresses from childhood traumas, or bacteria or toxins or inability to detox. These are creating a load that is too much for our bodies to handle. And so we want to find a way to relieve that load in order to win this battle. We also have patients that are reacting to everything. There are people that will smell a perfume or will come into even exposure to EMFs and have a huge reaction that just knocks them down. So we need to find a way to solve that. And finally, we have people that are stuck in fight flight. Our system is stuck in this situation where we're always feeling threatened. And our body doesn't get over into parasympathetic, where we have rest, digest, heal, repair. I want to apologize in advance if my voice does not hold out. Unfortunately, I recently got over COVID over the holidays. So still have a little bit of weakness there in the voice, but I'll do my best here. Speaking of illness, let's define the difference between acute and chronic illness. Most of us have been exposed to an acute illness. This is something where we have fever and chills. We have these things usually resolve within 1 to 2 weeks, sometimes with treatment, sometimes without treatment. But most of the people that we see here at this clinic and people that you guys know are dealing with some type of chronic illness. And this is something that where the symptoms are persisted past 6 months. And for some, it's been indefinite. So we want to distinguish those two. Now, most of the people that are having difficulty recovering from these type of illnesses are usually ones that are having dysfunction in Th1. And then they usually have a poor functioning immune system that is not allowing them their Th1 to work, and they're also shifted over to Th2. So let's define this Th1, Th2 so you guys understand a little bit more. So initially we have cells that are called naive cells, naive Th cells or thymus helper cells. They will distinguish either into Th1, thymus helper 1, or Th2, thymus helper 2. Well, these two different parts of the immune system have different strategies that they use in order to help us. The first one, which is Th1, is cellular mediated immunity, also known as our innate immunity. This is what we're born with. This is our protective mechanism, and this is operating within the cell. And this is where viruses and bacteria will actually multiply and develop. The other part is the Th2, which is the humoral immunity, also known as adaptive immunity. This is what is involved with the antibodies, when our body is always making antibodies to go against it. And this is humoral because it happens within the blood or the humor. And so versus the Th1, which operates mainly in the cell, this is happening outside the cell. And this is usually where viruses and bacteria are.
Oh, Dr. Farney, you got muted somehow. Sorry, I'm going to back you up there. There we go.
Okay.
Yep, we're good.
And so we were talking about the humoral immunity, and this is happening in the blood. It's happening outside the cell. And this is where virus and bacteria will actually attract the cytokines causing the symptoms. And this cytokines, the cytokine storm is what we've heard of recently with COVID. This is what usually causes the symptoms. And herein lies the problem with most people. They'll take an antibiotic, they'll take an herbal, and it will kill the bacteria, at least for a while, but it doesn't really relieve their symptoms. The problem is the cytokines. So when we're addressing restoration of health, we need to not only address the bugs, we also need to address the system and get it out of a threat center that it's in. Let's see if that's, there we go. And to further distinguish this, I really like to give an analogy that's already been used by Dr. Frank Schallenberg of a war analogy that helps us to understand the different parts of our immune system. So if we were to go to war with one of our neighboring countries, and they'd been working at this for a while, and they decided they wanted to start attacking us, well, they'll start sending missiles our way. Well, we've got anti-missile defense or antibodies, like what you see in Th2. And we'll start fighting against those. Well, if they have built enough to where our system cannot defend against those missiles, we're going to start having lots and lots of damage in our country. We need to go after the factories and the missile launchers that are actually launching those. And so the Th1 is actually going after those factories and taking them apart. They're actually going after the virus and bacteria, whereas your Th2 is actually helping with the antibody production and also killing some of them that have gotten out of the cell. But in order for us to be able to have success, we actually have to have both. And it's really about finding a balance. So this balance of Th1, Th2, this theory is fairly popular. Like I said, it's not proven yet, but it is, in my opinion, enough information that allows us to be able to support both sides. The unfortunate thing is once one becomes more dominant, it starts to send messengers out to suppress the other one. So if Th2 becomes more dominant, you're going to actually have a suppression of the Th1, which is our innate immunity. So in order to be able to have success, we have to bring that back into balance. Some of the examples of Th1 dominance are things like autoimmune conditions, multiple sclerosis, ALS, autoimmune thyroiditis or Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, and type 1 diabetes. On the other end of that, when we have an excess of Th2, you'll often find chronic viral, bacterial, fungal infections. You'll find things like atopic dermatitis, skin allergies, but also mast cell activation and histamine intolerance. These are conditions that are often there with this dominance. Some of the factors that are affecting this shift from Th1 to Th2 and more of this Th2 dominance are things like what you see here. The first one is that of understanding how the body works. There's been some debate on whether or not we get sick because of a terrain or we get sick because of the germs. It was Lister that founded the germ theory when he was attempting to prevent deaths of babies in the delivery room and also deaths of the mothers. What he found was that the doctors were going right from surgery or right from working on cadavers, and they were going right into the delivery room and delivering these babies. And he came up with the idea, which is really crazy, that if we would just wash our hands, we might actually be able to save some of these babies. Of course, he was laughed off at his time. But we now know that seems to be the most reasonable thing to do. And obviously, we do a lot of sanitation now to try to prevent that. Well, when he did it in the hospital he was working in, he actually was able to save thousands of babies and thousands of mothers. And eventually, obviously, this took hold. Well, the other theory was the idea of a Duchamp, that a French biophysicist, that basically said that germs are attracted to diseased tissue. And he believed that it was the terrain that actually attracted the germs to the body. Well, we now know that's probably a combination of both. We definitely have to address the germ or you're not going to have success in this. But you also have to address the terrain. How is it that you can have 30 people in a classroom, 2 people get sick and the other 28 don't? There has to be something other than the germ that's the problem. It has to be the terrain. So we have to look at both of these if we're going to have success in shifting you back to balance. Another concept is the idea of a victim versus champion. Now, many people have a pessimistic attitude and some have an optimistic attitude. If you are looking at things in a negative way, you're actually working against yourself. If you have this victim mentality that everything bad that's going to happen is going to happen to me, you're going to have a hard time overcoming some things, and it's going to shift you out of a good balance. But if you have a champion mentality where you're going to fight this thing until you win, then you're going to have that kind of factor that's going to be able to help you. Another big issue is oxidation and a lack of antioxidants. When we have oxidation in the body, it's much like rust on metal, like on a metal hinge. It's going to create damage and destruction. When we have in different organs and different tissues, it can create a whole host of different symptoms. But most of the people that are stuck in Th2 dominance are low on antioxidants and have a major oxidation problem. Selenium has been shown to actually be very helpful in preventing viruses and shifting you back into Th1. Zinc is another major one that's helpful in doing the same thing. Glutathione, melatonin, these are things that actually help work as an antioxidant to get your body the support that it needs for that part of the immune system. Other things can affect this, like sleep deprivation and stressors, excess stressors like even excess exercise or calorie restriction diets sometimes for people. Surgeries, these can all be a source of stress for the body that can shift you away from that balance. As we know, sleep deprivation plays a big role. Insomnia is a big factor. Fatigue is a big factor in a lot of chronic illness. And so these people are having this double whammy happen that's shifting them over into Th2. But also mercury exposure is another thing. mercury will actually suppress your glutathione and then will actually stimulate mast cell activation. Most people that have mast cell activation are actually dealing with a situation where they can't clear heavy metals and they can't clear the mold toxins out of their body. So they're continually exposed and it just builds up in their system. They're always triggered and reacting to this problem. Well, if we can somehow remove the mercury and improve their glutathione status by shifting back to Th1, then they may have more success in dealing with some of the symptoms of mast cell activation. One other side note that I want to talk about, which is one of the major symptoms that most people deal with chronic illness, is chronic fatigue syndrome. There have been studies related to Th2 and chronic fatigue, and they show that the natural killer cells that are very prominent in the Th1 immunity are very low in individuals with chronic fatigue. They also found that people with low natural killer cells have a shift towards the Th2. So it may be people that are dealing with this chronic fatigue, maybe there's an underlying immune problem that needs to be addressed in order to relieve some of this chronic fatigue. There are really four main causes of this excess or dominance of Th2. The first one is petrochemicals, which is very pervasive in our environment. There's now probably over 80,000 chemicals in our environment. Even the water we're drinking out of these water bottles are containing these petrochemicals. These are shifting us into a situation where we can't deal with or detox these chemicals. The parasites are a big one. They will shift us into Th2. It's also known that Borrelia, Bartonella, Babesia, even mold will shift us to Th2 so they can start stealing some of our resources. These bacteria are very smart. They've been around for a long time, and they have figured out strategies to how they can exist in our body. That's their first job, is they need to find out how can we survive in this host. If we can't, then we're going to go find another host. But the thing they do as soon as they get in is they start shifting us over to Th2 and start robbing us of our resources. Vaccinations are another source of Th2 dominance. The whole purpose of vaccination makes sense. We want to give the body a little bit of something that's bad so that it can build up this immunity or teach our immune system to fight against this so that we don't get overwhelmed. The problem with getting overwhelmed, if we've never been exposed to it, the body will get overwhelmed before it can actually get it under control. With the vaccinations, they give you a little bit, you build these antibodies, which are part of Th2, and you actually develop a defense system against it so that when you are exposed, it doesn't kill you. It may still make you sick, but you'll be able to get it under control eventually. Well, the problem with the vaccinations is we're now giving about 38 to our kids before they're even age 5. When I was growing up, I probably had 5 or 8. It tells you how old I am, but I just believe that we're overwhelming our system. There's no way that our body could handle that many viruses and that many bacteria at the same time. I think we need to slow down the process of this vaccination so that we can help our body to stay in balance. And lastly, stressors. We've mentioned these already, but stressors play a big role. The more of the allostatic load that you have on your system, the more likely you're going to be shifted over to Th2. So we want to deal with some things to help with that. If you want to do some testing to find out, are you stuck in this Th2 or Th1, there are cytokine tests that can be done, usually by your local lab. Some of the testing for cytokine for Th1 are going to be your interleukin 2 and interleukin 12. 12 being the major player with Th1, but also NK cells, the natural killer cells, and interferon are both involved with Th1 as well. Some of the ones for Th2 to really look at are interleukin 4, 5, and 6, and also interleukin 10, with interleukin 4 being the major player there. So if you're wanting to see, do I have an excess amount of these, it could indicate that you're dealing with this Th2. Obviously, there's more work that needs to be done on this, and there are some labs that actually have whole panels for this that allow you to evaluate that. But these are some of the things we look at when we're trying to determine, are they stuck in this Th2 problem? Now let's talk about some strategies for balancing this Th2 dominance. These have all been shown through studies to help. DHEA is the first one that we'll talk about. This is a balancer or adaptive strategy for dealing with stress. Most people have high excess cortisol. When they have excess cortisol, you're going to have what's called a pregnenolone steal, which is going to steal what would have been used to make the calming hormone called DHEA, and also your testosterone and estrogens. But when you're low on DHEA, you're going to have a problem dealing with stress and adapting to stress. Selenium, we've already touched on a little bit as a great antioxidant. We talked about how it actually helps to stop the replication of viruses. There was a study of 1 million people done with selenium showing its benefit in blocking viruses. Astragalus and mushrooms are also some things, especially the beta-glucans in mushrooms, are very beneficial in increasing Th1 and decreasing Th2. So really bringing that back to balance. These are great for a lot of different conditions as well. Melatonin is another one. We think of melatonin a lot with sleep and obviously helping us to have effective sleep. But melatonin really is probably one of the most important antioxidants right now. And a lot of people, as long as they can tolerate it, will actually take it during the day and use it as an antioxidant. This is a really big booster of Th1. Alpha lipoic acid is another one. This one is not only helpful in balancing the blood sugar, but it is also helpful in renewing or restoring the glutathione. And so the more you can restore that glutathione, the better you detox, the better you can help with inflammation, which is coming from the cytokines, the better you can deal with the problem. Probiotics have been shown in studies to be anti-cancer. They've also been shown to shift back over to Th1 and bring that back to balance as well. Of course, that's also good for digestion, absorption. This is an important component as well. And one other one here. I can't see my other screen there. Let me shrink this down here. Oops, I'm sorry. So strategies for reducing stress is another component. This is a big component. In fact, we will be talking a little bit more about the whole not immune system, the central nervous system, and getting out of fight, flight, and getting more into parasympathetic. But things like meditation, things like walking, things like putting puzzles together, these are all strategies that are going to actually shift you away from this fight, flight, and move you more into the parasympathetic and help with the vagus nerve as well. So strategies going after that is also going to help balance the system. One quote that I really like from some of the research that was done by Paris Kidd was this one here. Viewed from the traditional perspective, the healthiest immune state could be one poised more or less equally between cellular immunity and humoral immunity. So bringing that balance like we talked about. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the biologic system here and how we bring balance to this immune system, but also take kind of a global approach to helping the body. Because it's really not a matter of just going after the bacteria. It's not a matter of just going after the symptoms. We need to really help the body to do like it's supposed to do. We were created to grow and adapt and repair and rebuild. We were created to live a healthy life. Obviously, we've had stressors and things that have knocked us down, but in order to bring it back, we got to look at all these things. And I kind of almost look at it like the Chinese doctors do, like a gardener. We're nourishing the garden, we're tending to the garden, we're taking care of the weeds, but we're also supporting the things that are growing there. It starts essentially with improving the communication through the body, the nervous system, the endocrine system, but also the electromagnetic flow through the body, how we process light and energy. These are all important. And most people that come in here and most people that are dealing with chronic illness have communication issues throughout their body. So we want to address those fundamentally. And we do that through structural work. We do it through therapies, and we also do it through nutrition. Eating well and having positive thoughts. We already talked a little bit about the right attitude, but it's also finding the right balance of diet. And depending on what the case is, you've got to look at the foods that you're eating. Obviously, there are more restrictive diets than others, but for sure, you have to cut out those things that are creating inflammation. So you've got to take gluten out of the body. You've got to get milk products out of the body. You got to get sugar out of the body, and you've got to get those things that are creating inflammation. A lot of times, some of the heavier meats as well. So really eating the things that that man has not made is the most important thing. So as Jack LaLanne once said, if man made it, I'm not going to eat it. So try to stay on the edges of the grocery store, eating those fruits and vegetables and healthy meats. But another thing is a healthy circuit system. We look at the circuits of the body, the meridian pathways of the body, and we look at how information is flowing through those channels. We want to make sure that those are flowing. If they're not flowing, then you're going to have a problem with that system working. So we'll be checking all of those and making sure that we have that balance and that flow. We touched on neurofeedback a little bit already, but this is balancing that central nervous system, that autonomic nervous system. We're looking at vagus nerve. We're looking at the parasympathetic system and helping to get the body back into more of a balance there. And we're also looking at healthy detox. We want to make sure that the patient is able to detox. Like we talked about already, mold will sometimes block the ability for the body to make glutathione, but it also blocks two crucial pathways for detox, the NRF2 pathway and then MRP2 transports. These transports actually allow you to process mold out of the body. And the mold will shut that down in order for it to survive. So we want to open those pathways up and then allow the body to detox so that we can actually eventually calm that mast cell system down. So healthy detox is important. And I think this is something important for everybody. I believe there's so many toxins in our environment that we're all bombarded with it. Unfortunately, there are some like the canary in the coal mine that the people that are dealing with mast cell activation that actually it hits harder than others, but all of us should be doing things to try to detox our system. So we should be doing things like exercise. We should be doing things like sauna. We should be doing some liver cleansing a couple times a year and looking at what's actually going into our body, looking at the input. If we're having healthy food and healthy diet, but we're still breathing in mold from our house, or if we're still breathing in heavy metals from the environment we work in, something we have to address. We also need to look at digestion and assimilation. So digestion is the breaking down of food, but the absorption is really what becomes important. If you're not absorbing the food that you eat, then it's really wasting the time that you're using for digestion. So we need to make sure that there's a control of that inflammation. This is where diet comes back in. We need to look at things that are pro-inflammatory, get those out of our diet. And then we also want to look at supporting enzymes and things that are going to help us to actually absorb the food. Many people have trouble with hydrochloric acid. They don't make enough hydrochloric acid, and they also don't make enough enzymes. And this blocks their ability to be able to get well. Lastly, the healthy electromagnetic flow, looking at how this energy is flowing through our body, looking at how our body processes different color frequencies of light, and looking at how our body processes this energy. With that, I will take some time for questions. I've got a reference sheet here for you for some of the research that we talked about here.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Farney. I don't know if you want to stop sharing your screen. We might get more people depending
Yeah,
on.
let me get this off here.
Sure. And as a reminder, as we're just getting ourselves settled here, any question you have, please feel welcome to enter it in the chat box. And I will be happy to offer it to Dr. Farney for you. I know we had a few people submit questions ahead of time, so I'll begin with those.
Take that off?
Yeah.
Did it?
Did it take it off? No. Nope, you're still sharing. Let's see here. I think.
Okay.
There we go.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Just get a nice view of everything. All right. So one of the first questions that was submitted has to do with cellular health as we age. And so if you could just spend a moment of time talking about how cellular health changes as we age, and more specifically, even thinking about cells that relate to our immune system. I think people are looking for some guidance in that area.
So there's many concepts with that. The first I would think about would be the antioxidants, and making sure that our cells are not in a state of danger. There's a cell danger response that can happen. So we want to make sure that that is working well. But we also need to look at telomeres. We need to look at how nourished you are. If you're not getting the right nutrients in your system because your digestion's poor, or if you're not having an ability to replace things, especially with methylation. If your methylation process is off, this can play a role in how your body repairs things and renews its cells. So that would be I'd be looking at methylation. I would look at antioxidants. I would also look at the cell danger response.
All right. So, and I think, to kind of broaden that out for a minute, and then I'll come back to my next question. I'd once read, and actually reread it again recently too, thinking about the body. We have this concept, especially as we think about something like toxic load, right? We accumulate these toxins in our body, and we think of our body as being this like carrier vessel, but at the same time, our cells are constantly being regenerated, right? So though we might think of ourselves as these kind of static entities, we are in fact renewing, regenerating, creating new cells. So to your point, right, as you're listing out the things we can do to improve health, thinking about our emotional toxicity or our emotional well-being, thinking about our food intake and digestion and all these things, right? We have the capability to create healthy cells as we are, in our own genesis, our ongoing genesis. So I like to just kind of set the tone with that, because it gives weight to all of these recommendations you're making, that in fact, even if you've had unhealthy habits or if you've experienced exposure to toxins, things can be changed in time.
So every 7 years, we're a new person, right? We've turned over all of our cells. And so if you had bad habits when you were a teen, we've got a good opportunity to have good habits. So the next 7 years, you want to work on really healthy habits, so that the cells that you're remaking are going to have all the tools that they need in order to make the best cell possible. So it's really a matter of the body having the right resources and having the right system working while it's rebuilding these.
Okay.
It gets back to that methylation, but it also gets back to what we're eating. If we're eating man-made foods, you're not going to have a good chance of having healthy cells. Now, there's still people out there that eat crap, they smoke and they drink, and they still live to be 100 years old. There are genetic factors at play there. But in general, the majority of us really need to address the things that we can address in order to actually have the best shot at healthy cells.
Yep. And there's another question, a question in the chat box that's related. So if someone wanted to know about their methylation, the status of their methylation processes, their antioxidants, in their system, and thinking about the dietary component, maybe what will cause inflammation, are there different tests that you might recommend, or what process might you recommend they undergo?
There's a couple different things. So You can do quite a few using the blood, which is probably the simplest way. I don't know about the expense, but there are several that they can look at through the blood. But the best test is probably the slow test that you run through like 23andMe or Ancestry.com. You get that done and you get the information back and you plug it into a software program. There are some software programs there. Can't think of any of them offhand right now, but that will actually give you a report that shows, based on the research that was done for these different SNPs, these are problems you may be dealing with. Like, for instance, if you have SNPs with the glutathione pathway and you're not able to make the glutathione, you're going to have trouble detoxing. Well, so you're going to do things like N-acetylcysteine. You might do things like alpha lipoic acid or glycine that will actually help you to build more glutathione to overcome that. Now, there are also some concepts about that just cleaning up your diet, changing your exercise, making sure you're sleeping well, can actually change some of these. A lot of these, I've been doing this for a long time, and we used to just put people on everything. If we found this SNP, we put them on these different supplements. The body's already compensated for a lot of these problems. So we really just need to focus on the simple things that we can control. We can control when we go to bed. We can control what goes in our mouth. We can control whether or not we smoke. We can control all these factors that are affecting even our methylation. Just by controlling those, we're going to have a major change.
Got it.
Or a lot of money either.
Yeah. And one of those things you just mentioned came up in a couple questions, again, thinking more about a senior population or an aging population and immune health. There was a question about exercise being a factor. Do you have any recommendations there for what will lead to better immune health?
The most important thing, excuse me. Okay. The most important thing to me is walking. It gives you that continuous exercise that you need. And it's probably better than anything else as it relates to that. So probably walking 30 to 45 minutes, at least 5 days a week, is probably the most important thing they can do.
Yep. And I don't know if you're at all familiar with Dr. Dixon Tom out at the American Center for Biological Medicine. He is a huge fan of a brief YouTube clip, I think called 23.5 hours or something. It's about movement and the importance of walking. So if you want more information on that for our audience, I would be remiss not to promote this very favorite video of his, which makes a great case for walking. Yes. Yeah, wonderful. All right, a few other questions that were submitted ahead of time. One individual is struggling with some parasites that they, Demodex mites and Malassezia, which they've been told appear when the immune system is non-functioning and do not leave. This person is wondering if there's anything they can do to combat these parasites.
Yeah, this is a huge problem for most of us. We're all dealing with parasites, and really, I think we've had parasites for thousands of years, and it just seems to be in the last couple of decades that we've had more and more problems with it. And I think it's related to a lot of the processed foods we're eating, and I think it's related to a lot of the stresses that we have. So, not to beat a drum there, but doing things to reduce your stress, exercise, but also you've got to work on processing out. So one of the things you can do are coffee enemas. And these are where you'll inject a coffee into the butt there, and you'll let it sit there for about 15 minutes and then sit on the toilet and expel everything out. Doing that 2 or 3 times a week, making sure that you're getting rehydrated, taking your B vitamins, your probiotics back in. These are something that will help, but even lemon enemas as well. So like if you did a water enema to clean things out, and then you came back with a coffee enema, which really gets into that, once the junk's out of there, it actually gets into the liver and gallbladder and helps to stimulate detox. But then the lemon enema makes it an inhospitable environment for parasites to live there. And so we have to stop putting them in our body. And then we also have to do strategies to get them out. So the coffee enemas are important. But there are also some products that actually work. Mimosa I'm not even saying that right. Those are some of the products that can actually help to bind up some of these toxins. You also have to do it on a monthly basis, and you really need to do it for about a week during the full moon. So you almost want to pulse these treatments. So you'll hit it for about a week, about 3 or 4 days before the full moon, during the full moon, and a couple of days afterwards. And then you do it again the next month and the next month and the next month until you've only processed it out. But it takes quite a bit to process these out. And then using some of those strategies like we talked about.
Wonderful. And this is my favorite time to remind people we are an educational nonprofit. If you have questions about enemas, best not to ask me, best to consult a practitioner.
Yes.
It does happen. I get those questions. A few, I think, as we've talked a lot about nutrition today. So, and I see we have a few more questions about these parasites. You talked about blood testing to kind of suggest some markers on what's happening in the body for the microbiome, which can be a huge source of bacteria imbalance, parasite imbalance. Are there different tests you'd recommend for those, or will blood tests offer you?
There are stool tests. Genova has them. They have a comprehensive stool analysis that you can do. That would be one I would recommend.
Wonderful. Thank you. And another related question is eating raw fish in sushi a source of parasites?
Yes.
Yes.
Unfortunately. So like anything else, I mean, fish is good for you, but in excess, it's going to have mercury. It's going to have the parasites. So you just want to be very careful about eating that on a regular basis. It's really about balance. It's really about shifting things, but really the fruits and vegetables, some of your nuts and those kind of things, depending on your problems that you're dealing with, and being in balance. I mean, even red meat, I don't think red meat's a problem, but if you eat it every day, and if it's if it's not grass fed, you're going to have issues. So you want to kind of keep that to a minimum, and you want to have a bulk of your stuff is more of your fruits and vegetables.
Wonderful. Another question that was submitted ahead of time that speaks a little bit to kind of conditions that are hard to clear. This person's wondering how rosacea and herpes are affected by the immune system.
So yeah, you're dealing with a suppressed immune system. So anytime those pop up, it means you've already gotten run down. So the strategy is really before they come. You deal with things to help balance your immune system every day. So you do a little bit of walking, you do the vitamin C, you do the fish oils, you do the B vitamins and the adaptogens to help you, like ashwagandha. These are things that you're going to do to help manage your stress, because if you don't manage that, it's going to suppress your immune system, and those are going to just pop right up. So obviously symptomatically, there are things you can do once they're there, but really the important part of that is, how do I get my system back up to where it deals with itself? Most of our viruses, the body has an ability to deal with, and it's only when we're really suppressed and run down that we have an issue with them. So you evaluate, okay, what's happened this last couple of weeks? Have I been under a lot of stress at work? Have I been going through a relationship problem? Do I need to do some tapping? Do I need to do some meditating? Do I need to do some walking? And you'll find that these simple things, when done consistently, can keep you even killed. And that's where we need to be. We need to be even killed. We need to be balanced. We don't want to get rid of Th2. We don't want to get rid of Th1. We want to just live in this balanced life. Unfortunately, stress is very prevalent in our environment, and it's really a matter of how we deal with it. I mean, I take ashwagandha every day. I have a pretty stressful life myself. So I'll take ashwagandha, I take B vitamins, I will take fish oil, I'll take things like DHEA, I take zinc and selenium. So these are all things that I'm working on to help me to stay even kill. And then I exercise. I try to sleep 6 to 8 hours a night, 7 to 8 hours a night, try to exercise, try to drink plenty of water. So those are all things that we know to do, we just forget to do.
Yep. All right. I know we've kind of talked a lot about the intersection of age and the immune system here. We have had quite a number of questions to that point. There was actually one I missed from earlier about an individual who has a young a toddler that's constantly getting one cold after another. What this person's wondering what you might recommend as a starting point for this very young person.
So, I mean, you can do sometimes colostrum. You can also, you want to get probiotics on board because there's probably very likely that the gut itself is not in a good shape. I don't know if this baby were they breastfed? Were they, you know, if they had is their home environment stressful? I mean, there's a lot of different factors there, but I would first go after the gut. I want to make sure that they're having a healthy microbiome. And then I would also want to maybe give them a little bit of immune support through the colostrum. And then also vitamin C plays a big role. I mean, it helps to really boost the immune system. So,
very good. All right. Another question I was asking about light. What are there any sort of light therapy devices you would recommend for home use?
Well, you can do. You can get the colored glasses that you can use, and you could use those while you're listening to solfeggio or some of your binaural beats. Those are some things that you can use in processing that. I don't know if you can get the neurophotonic glasses that we use here in the clinic, but for sure you could get those glasses and you can just wear those for 10 to 15 minutes while you're listening to some of these different frequencies, and then process that.
Very good. All right, next question. Susan wrote in, there's a theory that even if a person eats blueberries, salmon, kale, etc., all the healthy foods, it may not be helpful to, it may be helpful to some, but not others due to their own specific microbiome. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people, and unfortunately, a lot of our patients they've done everything right, and they're still suffering. And that's the most frustrating thing. And it's a lot of times there's something missing, and we just haven't figured out what that was. And you know, that's why we spend a lot of time here just investigating and trying to unpack what these different things are. So, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't eat them. There's still going to be a good defense mechanism to help. It just means that there's something missing, and we haven't addressed it, whether it be the microbiome that's a problem, whether it be a shifted immune system. You know, going back to the lecture there, Th2, we're stuck in this Th2, or it might be the vagus nerve. It might be the fact that you have bad vagal tone, or maybe it is you're stuck in this fight flight. Most of us are stuck in this fight flight, and we don't have strategies to kind of get back out of that. I teach my patients to tap and really work on helping to retrain the brain to say, hey, I know you're feeling anxious. We're going to move towards wholeness. And that's more of a strategy to kind of rewrite programs that are going on in the brain. There's things like DNRS, there's the Gupta protocols, or programs that actually help you to retrain these brains that have been traumatized through either infections or through stressors that are now running programs that are based on old and false information. So you have to address those as well.
Perfect. And I think that's the important, I love what you said there about, you know, even if the things you're doing are not working, it doesn't mean you give up on them. Right. You know, if you know they're to be good for you. I think that's where a lot of patients who are seeking more information about biological medicine come in is, you know, at some point you're kind of made to feel crazy because the conventional tests aren't showing you a diagnosis that makes sense. And, you know, I think if you're feeling that stuck, that's, I think, one of the wonders of biological medicine. There are other tests out there that can teach you a little bit more about how your particular computer is processing and where those glitches may arise.
Well, and I just want to encourage those that are out there that are suffering like that. You're not crazy. This isn't just in your head. It's your head is part of the problem, but it's there is something, and we just don't have effective enough tests to identify. But the cool thing is there are treatments available, like you mentioned there, Katie. And so don't give up. Just continue to keep looking and searching for the right doctor. There are enough out there now that are able to help you. It's definitely something that can be fixed.
Yeah, and that is where the Marianist too can be helpful. Where I can be helpful is in helping to find those resources.
Yes.
Again, we've got Dr. Farney and his colleagues at Biologix in Tennessee, and we've got practitioners far more local to those of us in Mass or elsewhere, and we're happy to do that. All right, I just wanted to take the chance, take the moment, because I know a lot of people end up feeling that way when things kind of spiral beyond what feels like your realm of control. All right, another question from John: can too many B vitamins become an issue for some?
It shouldn't be. They are water soluble, so you just pee them right out. I don't like to take anything in excess, but I also know that chronic illness, you burn through magnesium, you burn through zinc, you burn through your B vitamins, you burn through vitamin C very quickly. And so again, you just need to be getting those back in your system. Now, what I prefer is that you take those along with getting good, healthy, organic sources from our food, because there are many things in our food that the vitamins don't provide. And so the best source obviously is still our natural organic foods, your fruits and vegetables. But I do those, and I also take the B vitamins as well. And then I also try to work on meditating and trying to do things to live in balance.
Great. And can you briefly, I know some of the key vitamins are fat soluble. They need to be taken with a source of fat. What are those few that are most important?
That'd be your A, D, E, and K. Those are all your fat soluble vitamins. And so those you do want to be careful about. They could at some point become a toxic level because of the fat solubility, but most people aren't going to take that many. But yeah, you would want to take those with food and make sure that you have a healthy lipid metabolism going on.
Good. All right. Well, we're not quite done. I just want to be conscious of the time here. I'm coming down to the last few questions, and I do have a few more that have been submitted. Susan had asked, I guess Susan works with adolescents that have extreme mood swings and behaviors, and they're asking, can gut issues and poor nutrition be a root cause?
For sure. It is. It's one of the things you've got to address, but you also have to address heavy metals with them. They're usually poor methylators and poor detoxers. And so you want to address how you can help the body to process those out. In fact, there's a whole book written by Handley on the autism epidemic and the relationship to vaccinations, and how the aluminum adjuvantes that they use now to stimulate immune response, a lot of times will get taken up into the brain. And if you have a leaky gut, you're also going to have a leaky brain, which is going to make you susceptible to some of those things getting into the brain. So for sure, checking the gut, but also helping them to detox.
You've mentioned methylation a lot, and it's just occurring to me that might not be a word that everyone is familiar with. Can you just quickly go over what you mean when you talk about methylation?
So I look at it as a series of chemical steps that are happening. So the Krebs cycle is a step sequence, and converting one thing to another, eventually making a different product. So for instance, one of the cycles that are happening within the methylation system is your tryptophan cycle. So you're taking tryptophan and you're converting eventually to serotonin, and then eventually into melatonin. And tyrosine in that same one that's using BH4, which basically you add a methyl group to it, and then it changes it from tryptophan and eventually into serotonin. So it's just a conversion cycle that allows a lot of things different to be made, but eventually it allows us to process DNA and to fix DNA and those problems that we talked about, the telomeres. So treating methylation is not necessarily as important as understanding methylation. So understanding why they're not processing things like with glutathione. If they're struggling to produce the enzymes to make glutathione, they're going to struggle with detox, which means they're going to struggle with heavy metals, they're going to struggle with mold, they're probably going to struggle with mast cell activation. So more understanding necessarily, not as much treatment to why things are happening. And that's where we kind of address it. I used to early on in my practice, we'd do the DNA testing, like I said, and we'd look at all these different SNPs, and we would put people on all these different supplements, and we had some success with it. The problem is these people, this is just one moment in time, what their body's doing. Their body's already adapted to the problem. and it's already tried to fix these problems. But if we can support it a little bit here, a little bit here, then we kind of tweak things and we allow their body to work at a higher level to where they're detoxing and doing the things they need. So.
Great. All right. I see one other question that snuck in there, and I do have a few more, so I'll try my best to get us through these, but really quick. There's been a few questions, obviously, about COVID. It's a very, timely topic still ongoingly, and they are related, so I'll knock them out. But one individual asked what you might offer to a younger child to support their immune system if they have COVID. And then second is this question of are there things to do to support the immune system that can help with some of the long haul cases or lasting symptoms? So the first one I'll just say again is there anything you can do to help support the immune system of a young child who has COVID?
So it's exactly what we talked about in this lecture. You're going to be looking at things like selenium. You can give small doses of selenium. You're going to be looking at mushrooms potentially. You're also going to be looking at vitamin C. Depending on how young they are, obviously you'd want to get some help from a functional doctor somewhere before you do that. But we just want to support this balance back to where you're supporting the body's ability. Like I was telling you about the viruses, I don't think I finished this thought, but our body takes care of these viruses. And if we are out of balance, then it can't take care of the viruses. They start to replicate. But as soon as our body gets back to balance, it takes care of it. It's like we've seen people with EBV, they're run down, the EBV comes back, they get better, the EBV goes away. It has more to do with this balance. So if you can help to support the balance, and again, going back to probiotics, going back to selenium, a little bit of zinc potentially with food, and also vitamin C, these are going to help you shift back into that balance.
Great. And I would assume that based on the fact that this has been said and we're now reviewing it in this specific context, it would be the same for someone recovering from COVID, yes?
Well, some of those things would be, you want to look at fish oil, specifically Alaskan cod liver oil, because it has a couple of different components in there that are really beneficial. But quercetin is important. Fish oil, also the vitamin C, like we talked about, and then that cod liver oil is really important.
Great, and those are for brain health. I take it.
A lot of things,
yeah. All right, and then this will truly be the last question because it does apply to everything you just said. When talking about these supplements we can take to support the body, is it advised that they might be taken at one time throughout the day, or should they be spread out in time throughout the day?
Again, it kind of depends on the person. I'll take some things with food, some things without food, but smaller doses taking over a couple of times over the day is probably better than a big dose. So like vitamin C, if you want to take a couple of thousand, maybe you do 1,000 in the morning, 1,000 in the evening. So you break these up. So, and again, it's important that you work with a doctor to make sure that you're getting the right dosage for the right weight and things like that. Wonderful.
All right. Well, that brings us to our time. And I'm very grateful, Dr. Farney, for your time and for offering this insight. I know, I think a lot of us take it to heart, as we're trying to kind of do our best to stay healthy during these times. And I'm grateful to all of you for joining us. And we hope to see you next month. Next month, we'll be joined by Lenny Felton, speaking about preventing and reversing cognitive decline, not just in, beyond a certain age, but beginning early on in life, kind of doing everything right to set yourself up to enjoy all of the years of your life. So again, thank you so much. And we hope to see you all soon.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.